Oh, I am gonna so love making this video because this is vindication of after 8 years of explaining how this show sucked from day one. Okay? And there's this article that's going to establish how I was right and how all of you fans of this show, because this article not only exposes the writers, not only exposes the show, but it also exposes all you fans of this show. Okay? And it's an article by Forbes. It's called Game of Thrones Showrunners David Benioff and D.B. Weiss confirmed the worst suspicions of the fan base. Oh, by the way, if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, I suggest you leave because I don't think you're going to like the rest of this video. To start off, I am a fan of the fantasy genre. Okay? Be it novels, movies, TV shows, whatever. Epic poems. If you are a fantasy fan and you know anything about Greek mythology, you'd get the reference. Or Italian, Latin, whatever. The thing is, I'm being a fan of those. As an example of how much of a fan I am, I actually watched Hercules by Kevin Sorbo. I watched Xena, Princess Warrior. Hell, I watched the Conan live-action TV show. Okay? Hell, I watched both Dungeons and Dragons movies. Okay? Because I love fantasy. It sucked, but I loved them. So when I found out that HBO was going to do a TV series on the Game of Thrones book series by George Martin, I was thrilled. It was like, oh, finally, there's going to be a TV show done properly, because I figured with the money they were putting in, I can't remember how much it was, $50-60 million or something, like some huge number, right? They were going to, because they were putting such a huge amount, that they were going to do, and because it was HBO, they were going to be able to do things with this TV show that network television or the cable channels wouldn't be able to cover. Little did I realize that it was going to be tits, ass, sex, and rape. Okay? Or what was it? Tits and dragons. Oh, dragons. Danny. Oh my God. Did I hate Danny beyond belief. Could this show have given Danny everything that she needed? Could they just not hand everything to Danny on a goddamn silver platter so that... I digress. I have a lot of pent-up hate over this goddamn show, and since I never covered it, it's going to come out in this, so I apologize ahead of time. Where was I? Tits and ass. This article, okay, exposes not only the show, it exposes the writers, and it exposes the fans, okay? Because here's the thing. A lot of the fans kept establishing how, oh, it's a great fantasy series. That gets destroyed in this article. Oh, it was all about how great the story was and the writing and the dialogue and the plot and everything. That gets destroyed in this article, which leaves only one thing left. The sex, nudity, and rape scenes. Sorry, I established this from goddamn day one that the only reason this show was as popular as it was because of the nudity, sex, and rape scenes. But none of you were willing to admit it because you were hiding behind how it's such a great fantasy show, how it's such a great plot story show. Sorry, those get established as non-relevant aspects of the show, and all that's left is the sex, rape, and nudity. So that's why you like this show. You got nothing to hide behind. So let's go through this article a little bit. Okay, so the two were brutally honest, essentially admitting that they were never fully qualified for the job from the beginning. Benioff and Weiss still aren't sure why George Martin entrusted them with his Magnus Opus, as the two didn't have any comparable experience or even an appreciation of the book's themes. David is describing the pre-meeting with George Martin, who was questioning their bona fides, and we really didn't have any. We had never done TV, and we didn't have any. We don't know why he trusted us with his life's work. It seems that the two men aimed for a moonshot and somehow hit their target, suddenly tasked with retelling an immensely complex story without fully understanding it. In fact, Benioff once said, themes are for 8th grade book reports, which tells you all you need to know about his dedication to the art of storytelling. The two went on to admit they had absolutely no idea how to work with costume designers and described their experience making Thrones an expensive film school. They acknowledged they had no idea why, after such a dismal pilot, why they went forward. Everything we could make a mistake in, we did. Script, casting, costume. Dan is saying that Game of Thrones was basically an expensive film school for he and Dave. Blah, 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 blah. Oddly enough, the show was at its peak during its early seasons, when Benioff and Weiss were still learning how to do their jobs. These guys had no goddamn clue what they were doing. So to tell me that this show was all about how well scripted, how well written, how well designed, how well organized is absolute bullshit. Because the two main forerunners of this show admitted they had no clue what they were doing. So any admittance that you like this show because of the writing and the story and the plot is bullshit. It's all bullshit. Then we get the fantasy elements. I said from day one that this wasn't a fantasy show. This was a drama with a fantasy background, where the fantasy was just there, just enough from you to... Because in the beginning, the only real fantasy aspects were the 3 dragons. That was it. See, that's what for you... Hold on, I'll get to the non-fantasy part. The two initially downplayed the fantasy elements of the books, okay, and wanted to expand the audience to non-fantasy fans. This worked in their favor at the beginning of the show, blah, 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 but meant that the intricacies of Martin's lore were never explored. The moderator asked why they chose to write all the episodes by themselves. Because we didn't know better. Dan wanted to remove as many fantasy elements as possible because we didn't just want to appeal to that type of fan. They wanted to expand the fan base to people beyond the fantasy fan base, to mothers, NFL players. The faceless... Oh, I'll get to that part. So, they've established that they literally took out as much of the fantasy elements as they could because they weren't gearing it to fantasy fans. They were gearing it to non-fantasy fans. What I had established from day one. Which is why I also mentioned how I'm a fan of the fantasy genre and why it's important. Because being an actual fan of the fantasy genre, this show was not geared to me. This show was not geared to the fantasy fan or fans of the fantasy genre. It was geared to the non-fantasy fan. So if you liked this show because of all the fantasy elements in it, you're full of shit. Because there wasn't any in the beginning. Oh, hold on. There were dragons. Every once in a while, every once in a while, they'd have a couple of minutes of the dragon showing up. Because to you, that's all fantasy had to be. Just have a couple of dragons every once in a while. That's a fantasy show, isn't it? All you need is dragon. Forget magic, forget elements of fantasy genre, anything else. Just have a couple of dragons. That's good enough for you. You want to know why? Because you're non-fantasy fans. You're not fans of the fantasy genre. So to you, just having a couple of dragons was good enough. What else? The Faceless Men, the Lord of Light, the Night King, all magical elements of the story that were never resolved despite clearly being vital to the story. Hence, the prince that was promised never showed up. And Bernie Dondarrion's grand destiny was teased but never resolved. Dan is saying that he let the actors redefine the roles, especially Macy, and they began writing for the actors. It is like the actor moved into the house and redecorated. He said he learned about the characters from the actors. Do you understand how the writers of this show had no goddamn clue what they were doing? They learned about the characters they were writing about from the actors portraying the characters. How pathetic and inept do you have to be? No. We love the writing. We love the actors. We love the character development. Good, because the writers had no goddamn clue what they were doing. They were exposed only when they ran out of material and had to finish the story themselves. Amusingly, the two never went online to read criticism of the show from fans who clearly understood the books better than they did. So, not only did they have no goddamn clue what they were doing, they purposely avoided actually getting information on the show and what to do and how to make it better. They purposely ignored, input from people who actually knew the show, actually knew the characters, actually knew the books, and they went, nah, that's not necessary. Go ahead, you fans of this show. Tell me tell me exactly how amazing this show was when the writers themselves have established they didn't even care that the show wasn't even close to what the book elements were, the theme, the characters, anything, and purposely avoided and ignored information that would have helped them even know what was going on. So, fantasy element, gone. Story, plot, script, writing, gone. What's left, everyone? The sex, nudity, and rape scenes. That's why you liked the show. That's why the show was as popular as it was. It had nothing to do with the fantasy elements, because guess what? According to the the two writers, there wasn't any. Wasn't the writing, wasn't the characters, wasn't the plot, wasn't the story. Guess what? The story writers have just admitted that wasn't part of the show. It's not like they knew what they were doing. When I saw the pilot episode, I knew within the first 15 minutes of the pilot episode that this show was gonna suck and had no goddamn clue what they were doing. You want to know how I know? I'm gonna go through the first roughly 15 minutes of the pilot episode. We had the Night Watchers leaving the wall. Okay? Now, we get the first shot of the wall. Huge, immense, amazing, beautiful. Now I'm going, holy crap, what's the wall? Information, anything, narrator, voiceover, something. Give me something to explain what this giant wall is, how it works, what it's based on. Nah, they didn't have to. You know why? Because the non-fantasy fan, which was their target audience, don't give a shit. All they saw was this really cool wall, didn't care what it was about, didn't care what it was for, how it was formed, what it is, why it is, didn't give a rat's ass. Why? Non-fantasy fan. You want to know what a fantasy fan wanted to know? Wanted to know what the wall was. How did it work? So anyway, so now we have the Rangers, who are going out to scout for wildlings in the winter with all this snow, wearing all black, riding black horses. These are Rangers. These are scouts. Okay? A wildling would have been able to see them from a mile away. Why weren't they wearing white? Why weren't they wearing white cloaks? Why weren't they riding white horses? Nah. Because it's not like you as an audience recognize stupid when it's right in your face. But that wasn't enough. Then we get, I can't remember the name of it. It was the Deserter. The Deserter eventually finds a wildling encampment, I guess, right? And they're all dead and placed in that little symbol thing, right? So he leaves, gets the other two Rangers, come back, and the wildlings are gone. Where did they go? Where did they go? Who knows? Who cares? And then I forget the name of the leader, first guy that dies. He goes, go look for them. Gee, it would have been so much easier to, track them as Rangers in the snow if they had left, I don't know, footprints in the snow? Nah, no footprints in the snow. Because that would make sense. That would be logical. Not only that, then they don't wait. The wildlings literally wait until the Deserter comes back with the other two Rangers before they rise up as whites. Why didn't they rise up as whites before? What the hell were they waiting for? The best plot element aspect? I mean, do you understand how badly written this opening 15 minutes was? The wildlings were whites. They were already killed by the white... Oh shit, I can't remember what they were called. They were killed by the White Walkers. Okay? So, why didn't they become whites? Why were they sitting dead for so long in the encampment? And not only that, where were the White Walkers when the Deserter showed up? No. We have to wait until it's the most plot suspenseful aspect. That's when the White Walkers will show up. I mean, come on! How stupid do you have... Oh, look who I'm talking to. The first 15 minutes established that these guys had no clue what they were doing. This story had no clue what they were doing. Then, the Deserter goes to... He leaves. Okay, not only that, then we have the Deserter, and we have the White Walker, and we have White Walkers all over the place, and we have whites all over the place. And the Deserter lives? It's not like he ran away. He was on the ground, totally surrounded. Why did the White Walkers let him live? Why did the whites let him live? Who cares? The writers obviously had no goddamn clue. You as an audience had no goddamn clue. Then we have the Deserter deserting. Why? Why did the Deserter become a deserter? Why did he flee? There's literally no reason for him to have fled and deserted his post. He would have gone back to Castle Black and gone, hey, there's whites. Hey, there's White Walkers. They probably wouldn't have believed him, but he wouldn't have been accused of being a deserter and getting killed. They would have gone, here, show us where they went. What happened? And then they would have encountered the White Walkers. They would have encountered the whites. And it would have been a whole different story. But the writers have no clue what they're doing. Okay? The writers needed to find some way to connect the first scene of being near the wall to the second scene where they were in Winterfell. Right? So they had to find a way to connect the first scene to the second scene, so the deserter goes and ends up getting captured by the Outriders? I can't remember. The Outriders of House Stark, and get sent to Lord Stark. What, Ned? Ned, I think. But there's no reason for the deserter to have done that. It would have made absolutely more sense and realistic for the deserter to have gone back to House Stark, to Castle Black, and then they would have... It's insane how stupid just the first 15 minutes of this show was, and revealed how stupid this show needed to be just to get the plot going forward. This is just... What else? Was there anything else? Anything else in this article? I'm sure there's more. Were you listening to the feedback to your fans as things went along? Dan, we really did not. Dan doesn't see the value of considering other people's reactions. Who cares what the fans think? Dave acknowledged that he Googled the show and it upset him. It seems that the Game of Thrones writer's room was a safe space, shielded from criticism and outsider perspective. In a way, it's a relief to finally understand why the show went in such a bizarre direction. There was no one there to tell Benioff and Weiss that their ideas were nonsensical. See, that was the thing. You guys figured it out in season 8. I figured it out in season 1. You guys were like 7 seasons too late to figure out that this... Because the only reason the show had any type of structure was because they had the actual novels as a foundation. So since they had the novels as a foundation, they had something to work with. Once they didn't even have the foundation, their inability to do anything resembling anything of value went out the window. The only thing that kept this show alive for 7 years, or for 7 seasons, well, 7 years, 7 seasons, was because they had a foundation that was so rock solid, even they couldn't screw that up. Casting also dictated how and when they killed people. Question about scouting locations. And here's the other thing. Considering how often and how so many people died, I loved how the certain characters who had to stay alive had such plot armor. Keep it like Jon Snow and what was the other guy? That young girl, the girl that was stabbed and then thrown into the river. Right, the one who says I can spot a killer a mile away. Right, I mean just absolute plot armor on the characters that needed to be alive because the writers had no goddamn clue what they were doing. Nobody was there to tell them to stop inserting random rape scenes for shock value, or that Euron Greyjoy was dreadful, or that the great house of Westeros finally putting aside their differences and crowning a wheelchair-bound shaman as king was immensely indescribably stupid. I mean, what more do you want? This is an article that exposes how butt stupid, useless, and bad the show was. You have no all of you fans of this show have no more defense that the only reason you liked this show and the only reason this show was popular is either one, you were so goddamn stupid and have no idea and weren't even aware of the level of stupid in this show, okay? Or the only other reason you liked the show was the nudity, sex, and rape scenes. You can pick whichever one you want. I'm still right. I was still right from day one, and I love it. I love this article. I love this article so goddamn much. Is there anything else? Thomas described his accidental success as falling down an elevator shaft and landing in a pool full of mermaids. Yeah, the fact that they're not doing Star Wars, who gives a rat's ass. So, for all of you Game of Thrones fans, this article justifies and vindicates me that you were all full of shit the entire 8 years, or the entire first 7 years you were fans of this show. Thank you, Forbes. Thank you. What are their names? You have to understand, I hardly ever watched the show. After about season 3, I stopped giving a rat's ass. I tuned in every once in a while. Yeah, David and DB Weiss. Thank you, guys. Thank you for exposing yourselves, your show, and the fan base. Anyway. Oh God, I hope there are Game of Thrones fans watching this, and they're so goddamn butthurt being exposed for the bullshit and idiots they were for liking the show, on how stupid you had to be to accept the stupid and bad writing and bad elements and bad plot that this show admits that it was full of. Or the fact that, you only really liked it because of the sex, nudity, and rape scenes. God, I hope you're all butthurt. I really am. Because you deserve it. You deserve to finally get the due that you deserve, that you're all full of shit for liking this show. Or the reasons you had for liking this show. Because it's all been exposed. Love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. God, I'm glad I got that off my chest. So how you doing? Anyway. I guess that's pretty much all there is to say. Anyway. I always have a hard time trying to figure out how to end these things. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm out of here. See ya.